Yeah, you don't need to do that now.
Right. Hey, everybody. Welcome. This is so if you're watching on Facebook Live, you might see this pop-up surprise. I figured out that I can go on Facebook Live from the station here, WMNH 95.3, even when it's not during my show, without actually interfering with, of course, the other programming on WMNH. So we're recording an interview tonight that was going to be played on tomorrow's show, Friday's show. But when I figured out that I can do this on Facebook without messing anything up, we figured, well, we'll do that too. So if you happen to be watching it live on Facebook Live, you'll be able to call in. We'll give the number and so forth. But or actually, you'll be able to see it anyway. It's on there. It's on the page. So we don't need to give the number. So here we are. So my cohort Jon Hopwood is here. How are you, sir?
Fine.
And we are interviewing Mr. Aaron Day. He is a candidate for Governor of New Hampshire. How are you, Aaron?
I'm great. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's great to have you here. It's been quite a while since I've seen you.
Yep.
And you are running as a Libertarian?
I am running as a Libertarian, yes.
Okay, very good. And what made you decide to jump in the race?
It really was the results of this legislative session. I've been a political activist for the last 5 years or so and have been primarily focused on financial issues, fiscal issues like Obamacare, et cetera.
Yeah.
And, have been fighting that pretty extensively, which is in part why I ran for U.S. Senate in 2016. But I had some high expectations that, with Republican majorities, they were actually going to address some of the fundamental issues that we have in terms of our budget and in terms of, repealing this Obamacare Medicaid expansion.
Mm-hmm.
And it turned out to not be the case. And in fact, again, it's the worst legislative session since I've lived here. And so I've kind of given up on the Republican Party. I thought I've been a Libertarian since 1995. I actually tried to join the Libertarian Party way back then. I sent in my card and everything. I'm still waiting for my newsletter. And so the Libertarian Party hasn't necessarily had its act together. And so I'm more interested in trying to achieve liberty than necessarily be a part of a fringe movement.
Right.
But at this point, the Republican Party has just completely lost its way. And I'm not seeing any path forward with the Republican Party.
Okay, so you're a full-on Libertarian.
I am a full-on Libertarian. Yeah.
You've run for office before.
Yeah.
Were you a Republican then, running as a Republican then, or
no? I was an independent last time.
Okay. Well, last time you ran for, did you run for governor before?
I ran for U.S. Senate.
You ran for Senate. That's right. Yes, against it was Kelly Ayotte
and Maggie Hassan. And
yeah.
In fact, that was a whole situation. Again, this all goes back to Medicaid expansion and goes back to 2013. I was part of a group of about 12 activists that were trying to, work with Jeb Bradley and everybody else to try to come up with a game plan to unify the party. And so we had a series of 6 meetings.
Yeah.
And we agreed that opposition to Obamacare is the one area where we should have mutual agreement. Well, it just so happened during that time, the Republicans in the Senate, the minority Republicans in the Senate, passed Obamacare Medicaid expansion.
Right.
So completely against the kind of spirit and the sense of what was going on within the party and within the different factions within the party.
Yeah.
So at that point, I recruited candidates, 5 candidates to primary, sitting, Republican senators. We picked up a couple of seats there, and then
in the state senate, in the New Hampshire State
Senate, because that's where all the bad activity happened.
Okay.
And then in 2014, I formed a super PAC called Start 360, and we raised a bunch of money. The goal being to get enough candidates elected to elect Bill O'Brien as Speaker to repeal Medicaid expansion. Well, we got we got 76 people elected. We had the votes. Bill O'Brien didn't do himself any favors in that process. But what we learned is that John H. Sununu and Kelly Ayotte actually intervened in that Speaker's race and were whipping votes. One of the candidates for Speaker was actually told, "You need to drop out of the race. We need Sean Jasper to be the Speaker so that we can clear this path for Kelly to get reelected." And so what I said is, look, if this party is being run from the top down by the Sununus, by a political dynasty, and by Kelly Ayotte in her career path, if they're going to go against what's in the best interest of the state and what's in the party platform, then I guess the only way to change their view is to actually go directly after their self-interest. And so I said, I'm going to run this independent slate. I actually ran candidates for U.S. Senate, CD1, CD2, and I attempted to, run a candidate for governor who turned out to not be on the ballot or have ballot access.
Okay.
And it turns out all three of our candidates, myself included, were the margin of difference that cost the Republicans all three of those seats.
Oh, no kidding.
But it still didn't matter because, so you would think even with that, in that Senate race, the Republicans lost $80 million. It was the biggest loss for the Republican Party in the country. And they're unfazed. And Sununu remains arrogant and thinks that, he's just going to walk on water. He had a group of 40 activists in a room and basically told them, well, you may not like me on this policy or that policy, but you need to vote for me anyway because we might lose control of the House and we might lose control of the Senate.
No, we talk about Chris Sununu, the governor, rather than John, the father, who,
Well, and he's involved.
Sure, he's like a kingmaker.
Yeah, absolutely.
A kingmaker, yeah.
Yeah.
But, the truth is, and I came here as part of the Free State Project.
Yeah.
And, we moved here and my kids just turned 8. If you won't mind, I'd like to say hi
to
Ari and Samara. They'll be listening tomorrow. But, we came here because this was, before we moved here, the freest state in the country. And we thought this would be a great place to raise a family. And then to get involved in this political mess and realize we've only got about 10 years left. If we don't course correct, we're in big trouble. I don't know if you know this. 30% of New Hampshire's entire budget is now from the federal government for Medicaid.
Okay.
And Republicans started basically stealing federal matching money from Medicaid to cover the state budget issues that had nothing to do with health care.
Okay.
Yeah.
So in 1991, Judd Gregg was governor.
Mm-hmm.
We had a $35 million budget deficit, and he wanted to run for U.S. Senate. Well, there are two things you could do in that scenario. You could pass an income tax or a sales tax, which I'm against.
Yeah,
by
of
the
course.
way.
Yeah.
Or you could cut spending. Well, he decided with his friend John H. Sununu, who is the chief of staff for George H.W. Bush, they found a federal loophole where they could take matching money from Medicaid and divert it to the general fund.
Okay.
And so, the way I look at this is, frankly, it's stealing money from children. You basically had two choices. You could have a tax or you could steal money from children.
So just to be clear, by diverting it to the general fund, then in theory you do whatever you want with it because it's in the general fund.
That's exactly right.
Okay.
And that's exactly what they did. And that's exactly what they have continued to do to the tune of billions of dollars in this state. And then it's become a trend. We were like the leaders in this.
I understand that that type of creative accounting even goes down to municipalities and stuff where federal monies are often tapped or diverted.
Yeah, they are.
Yeah.
They are. And then everybody says, well, we're just getting back our fair share. But when you have $21 trillion in debt, when you're running $500 billion to $1 trillion deficits every year, and where Medicaid, Medicare, and Social Security are the biggest component of that money, that debt will have to be repaid by future generations, which is why I say literally they're stealing money from children.
Mm-hmm.
And then Judd Gray goes on to call himself a self-described skinflint and fiscal conservative. And I got to the point where as I started studying this and then looking at Medicaid expansion and then how this plays in with the hospitals and everything else, I'm like, this is ridiculous. Everybody in this state is less healthy and less wealthy as a result of the way both of these parties have manipulated this. Gene Shaheen destroyed the insurance market. And so at this point, what did we have? We had double-digit premium increases. We have very few choices for medical services. It's mostly these nonprofit hospitals.
Yeah.
We had a situation a few years ago where Cancer Treatment Centers of America wanted to move in and provide an innovative service. And the Certificate of Need Board said, no, you can't come in. Well, why? Well, here's how it works. These nonprofit hospitals are the only ones that are eligible for these federal Medicaid matching grants. But they don't make money on the deal. In fact, the hospitals have been, screwed over, frankly, as well, because it's the politicians have been taking money that they are supposed to be using to pay these healthcare costs, and they're diverting it. So it actually puts pressure on the hospitals. So if somebody comes in with a new service and they say, hey, look, we're not going to take Medicaid, then the hospitals say, well, we're going to lose even more money. We can't do that. You need to protect us. So as a result, as citizens of New Hampshire, we now don't have the benefit of Cancer Treatment Centers of America, and who knows how many other types of innovative healthcare services. So, it's on and on and on.
We should probably talk about your background a little bit because you know something about healthcare and so forth, and we haven't really mentioned that, but just to kind of get a little bit of your resume out there at the same time.
Yeah, I'm a serial entrepreneur. I started my first company when I was 19. It was an internet company, sold that in 2001, and then I got into a healthcare space, and I created a company that helped companies implement wellness programs that
Yeah.
incented people to improve their health. Very successful company, profitable. We were in 43 states. And it was systematically dismantled by three things: by Obamacare, by Dodd-Frank, and frankly by an overzealous Attorney General, Eric Holder, at the time. And so I guess hell hath no fury like a entrepreneur scorned. I mean, that
Yeah.
kind of got me fully into activism, because there was, this wasn't a situation where I was targeted. Like, the government didn't say, we're going to go after Aaron's company. This
Yeah.
is just, these are the unintended consequences of what bureaucrats do. And they've done it to, not only me, but, countless other entrepreneurs.
Sure.
And so when I found out that Republicans in New Hampshire were leading the charge to expand Obamacare Medicaid, I thought, am I in the twilight zone here? And I've subsequently figured out why, and I figured out kind of all of the details, and I can no longer be a Republican. And in fact, when I talk to people about it, I've written some articles about it. I'm like, I don't know how you can do it. Once you know this information, I don't know how you can remain a Republican, given the nature of the way that they've essentially been stealing money from children, lying about it, and then calling themselves fiscally conservative.
Well, I feel like fiscal conservatism, though, as a concept, as a principle, is kind of dead anyway. I mean, we have a Republican Party, which, when you look at what they've done in Washington in terms of this new budget, I mean, Dick Cheney said it back when W was in there: deficits don't matter, don't worry about it. And I really feel like that's kind of the attitude now. Didn't Chris Sununu say something at a hearing about worrying about how much things cost? That's kind of the old way of doing things. Now you just spend the money and you figure it out later.
America is a Ponzi scheme.
Yeah.
That's what I say.
Yeah,
well, it's true.
He
yeah,
said that during the Marsy's Law thing. I mean,
that's what
exactly right.
That's what it was. Yep.
He did.
Yeah.
And what's sad about this is that historically it's not true. There's an economist named Martin Armstrong who actually is a fascinating guy. There's a movie about him called The Forecaster. He ended up spending 7 years in jail for contempt because he wouldn't give the judge who had ties to Goldman Sachs his computer that had his forecasting models
What judge
on it.
doesn't?
Well, yeah, I know.
Supreme Court. That's
me,
the Democrat.
Tell me about it. But his thing is he put these models together by analyzing coins. He actually had 250 people that would actually go out and acquire historical coins going back 6,000 years. He would get the prices of currencies throughout time and throughout history. And he came up with these models. And what he said is, look, this is the same story over and over and over again, from civilization to civilization, nation to nation.
Like the Tudors in England, the inflation was incredible, but that's the beginnings of capitalism. They say in Europe, but other people have it. But I mean,
yeah.
The Tudor, the coin. When you're talking about coinage, like you can see the coins with Henry VIII, and then the nose on a silver coin is copper.
Right.
And the Tudors, Henry, and then Elizabeth the First.
Yeah.
They debased the coinage.
Oh, yeah, no, the debasement
Inflation.
of it.
Inflation was incredible.
It's like that with all of the coins in every scenario.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I lived through when I was a kid, I was born in 1959, when 64, the last silver coins, and we'd take the 65 coins, which are Cupro nickel, and you'd turn them on there at the edge because you could see at that time the copper in them, and then you'd keep the silver.
Wow.
Well,
Yeah.
and so the pattern goes, the people in charge, bread and circus, they buy votes essentially, and eventually they either go bankrupt or they end up in war because they end up having to fight over resources. That's the plan. We don't deviate from that plan. What we're doing when Sununu says, well, we're beyond having to worry about money. No, we're not. There's nothing different about this situation.
Yeah. But don't we have a big surplus, though? Doesn't the state... This is something I've never understood. Doesn't the state have a big budget surplus?
Accounting math.
Like a rainy day fund or something that we Because I remember hearing the number once and thinking that's a big number.
Government accounting is... there's different types of government accounting, including the federal government, which is bound by really nothing. But... and they always say if the federal government used the generally agreed accounting principles, everybody be in jail.
Right.
But states, governments have their own accounting.
Yeah,
An accountant can make a lot of things happen.
Yeah.
Well, they can make a lot of it, but there's a very meager rainy day fund compared to the biggest financial problem that we have, which is $5.5 billion of unfunded pension liability.
Yes.
So that's the issue. So for me, it's about we have to cut spending, we have to repeal Medicaid expansion, and we have to fix the pension system. And again, you know, a lot of people say, "Oh, well, you just hate government." This isn't about hating government. This is about basic fairness. I remember when I was growing up, if you had a job in government, there was a service component to it.
Yeah.
You made less money. That was kind of the
Yes.
expectation.
Yeah.
We have a situation now, if I'm not mistaken, the largest pension right now goes to the head of the pension fund. I believe it's
Wow.
$250,000 a year. Well, so the next question is, well, how much, you know, what is the salary for that
Right.
position?
Yeah.
You can't find out because of
Wow.
the kind of organization it is. They don't disclose what this person's salary is.
Well, you know, like detectives are retiring now in New Hampshire. I'm not talking about even a chief, and they're getting $130,000 a year or something. And I'm thinking, geez, it's like a 4-star general's pension. You
Oh,
know what
yeah.
I mean?
Oh, yeah.
And
Yeah.
but one thing with the Supreme Court decision now, which is going to change public sector unions because it's going to let people opt out. My God,
Oh,
you
yeah.
know.
The right to work decision.
But
essentially,
how's
yeah.
that going to affect the funding of pensions and by states? Isn't it true Illinois is in a crisis?
Well,
over that?
Illinois is in a crisis. California's in a crisis.
Yeah.
I mean, what's going on here is no different than what's going on in Europe. With
But we don't talk about it here.
no, we
They
don't.
talk about it in California. They talk about it in Illinois. They don't talk about it here.
No, we hide here. And
Everything. Yeah.
and this is why I'm running on
Yeah.
these very specific issues. And the governor here is not. This is a hard thing. I talk to a lot of voters, and they assume that you have presidential powers. They view the governor as kind of like
Right.
they view a president.
Right.
We have a very weak governor
Yes.
in terms of what you can do, but we do have veto power, and I plan on using that very explicitly and openly, you know, up front to try to secure a mandate so that
Yeah.
we can address these big issues.
Yeah, because we have the executive council, so obviously our governor, it's a constitutionally weak office.
Well, yeah, can't even pick your own cabinet. I mean, the
Right.
AG, you're stuck with this AG for 4 years, right? I mean, so
Right.
it's so people that come to you and say, well, can I help you with this? So, I want to actually say to them, well, no, I actually can't help you with this. But more importantly, I talk to a lot of people. We have a serious issue with corruption and transparency.
We rank in the bottom 5. This is a big issue of mine, and we don't have any whistleblower law, but that's another thing. Transparency, the bottom 5. We're with like the Clintons, Arkansas, Mississippi. It's just shocking because I was gone for 32 years.
Yeah.
I was here, grew up here, then after high school went to college in Boston, then Army, and spent most of my adult life in California. Then you come back here. I found it's shocking, the lack of
Yeah.
transparency and the corruption. But what's even more shocking is nobody talks about anything.
Right.
Nothing.
Well, sometimes when you do, you get sued. That's a whole other
Let's not talk about
That's a
that
whole
because you're not
other,
the only one.
Yeah,
Other thing, yeah.
Yes, it's called a strategic lawsuit against public participation, but we don't want to talk about that.
Right.
Yeah.
So we have because we're doing this Thursday night via Facebook Live, we do have a question in the Facebook Live chat. Would you veto a bill supported by 80% of the people based on your feeling on the bill, or would you pass it? So if 80% of the people are
Like for what?
it's not a specific issue. I guess broadly, if 80% of the people supported something, would you still kill it if you didn't agree with it? Well, let's take the expansion under the Affordable Care Act. We'll use that.
Well, I mean, I'm running explicitly. So let me give you a little framework of how I view things.
Yeah.
First and foremost, if you give me a budget that increases the size of government, I'm going to veto it. Period.
Yeah.
But here's the next piece, and this is the heavy use of the veto power. If you don't give me bills to repeal Medicaid expansion and to move the pension system from defined benefit to defined contribution, I'll veto every other bill that gets in front of my desk.
Wow. Okay.
Because, again, no one is addressing these problems. I'm saying it now. You're going to see it. Everybody who hears me on this campaign is going to hear that. That is it.
Yeah.
But beyond that, I've got a process for how I'm going to view everything else, which is I believe we need to restore power and money back to the people. Fundamentally, that is a huge issue. So, I will be inclined to sign bills that give people their money back, give people their rights back. And, and with respect to social issues, I think we need to stop adding protected classes and move to focusing on individual rights, because this is something politicians do. Politicians create special interest groups, and they create protected classes to pit us against each other. I mean, I view the two parties as collections of these special interests. and protected classes, that and all that happens when you put those laws is you divide people further. So we need to go back to protecting the most important majority of all, which is the individual, or minority of all, the individual, and focus that way instead of creating, more meal tickets for lawyers.
Thoreau, a majority of one.
Yeah.
No, when you were talking about that, if you believe you're right and your neighbors are all against you, you're a majority of one.
Right.
Morally.
Right. Yeah.
But again, I'm laying out these principles so that the voters are going to know advance. I mean, you may think I'm nuts, and you may not like that, and then obviously you won't vote for me. But you're going to know with absolute certainty how I'm going to handle issues.
We've got another question in the Facebook live chat. You're picking two issues and saying you would veto all bills if not presented with those two issues. How is that different? I'm not sure I quite understand. I'm not sure I quite understand the question. Well, so if you, maybe she means, so if you're picking,
You're a special interest? These are your special interests?
I'm not exactly, maybe they'll clarify the question because I don't quite understand. So now, as far as social issues, so is there anything that, I mean, you probably, I would assume as a libertarian, you don't want to get involved in social issues at all, right? You don't want the government involved in any kind of...
No, I don't want the government involved. And you know what? I got to tell you, I've talked to, and I've worked with some social conservative groups. And this is the thing that there's a matter of tone and discussion and everything else. I mean, I've worked with Cornerstone on stopping the funding of Planned Parenthood, for example. I think that there's an opportunity to work with the social conservatives to get the government out of these things entirely. I actually think there's consensus there, and I think sometimes people, start labeling and throwing names around and calling people bigots because they hold these particular views. But I actually think there's a big win to get government out of marriage and to get government altogether out of these institutions.
Yeah.
So if I'm elected as a libertarian, then, this is a huge opportunity for us to actually move these social things in that direction.
Right.
And just get the government out of it. And I think there's wider agreement around that than I think people might assume.
Right. If you are watching via Facebook Live on Thursday night, we can take live calls. Obviously not if you're listening on Friday. But give us a call in the next little bit, 603-250-6007, 603-250-6007. And so, I mean, in terms of, obviously you're going to get a lot of pushback from people about scaling back the Medicaid expansion. I mean, what do you do? Have you had to answer any questions yet or discuss with anybody about alternatives for people who are potentially going to lose their health care if you do that?
Well, I am, and that's a bigger part, and I'm working on some other things, some nonprofits. So there's one aspect of this this is what I can do as governor. But as I'm going around the state, the thing that I want to do is I want to recruit people to get involved in activism, to come up with voluntary solutions, and to help provide training to make them more effective activists, because I really think that there's a big opportunity here. With Medicaid expansion, though, Medicaid expansion is the idea that it's really helping people is a pretty big myth. This expanded part of it, a lot of the people that are taking advantage of that are single, young, able-bodied people. This is a situation where, we're kind of creating a mountain, we're making a mountain out of a molehill. But the other issue is the politicians have used the opioid crisis as the justification for it. And I've got to tell you, the money that's being spent, Medicaid is the largest distributor of prescription opioids. I mean, talk about manufacturing a problem and then putting together an ineffective solution for it. This is the thing that I've called on, and I've stated things about treatment centers and are they effective or not. And there have been reports in NHPR. There was Serenity Place here.
Yeah.
Time and time again, you have situations where financial mismanagement, accusations of are they selling drugs on the premises and everything else. But there's another component to this that I think is really important, because the way Medicaid decides, and they put a lot of red tape around how you can spend the money. And so they'll say you can only spend money on treatment, but it has to be this type of treatment that they call evidence-based.
Okay.
But the reality is there is no evidence that these things work. What we actually need is experimentation, not subsidizing something that hasn't actually proven to solve the problem. So we need to innovate. We need to try new things. But every time I see something, it's like this federal $23 million grant. What are they doing? You can only use it to buy drugs. You can only use it for Suboxone, for Narcan, and for the other one is I think methadone or
Methadone,
some
yeah.
version of that. I've heard a lot of people, and I've seen a lot of complaints about whether that actually works. And,
Right.
And, it's just another crony deal.
Mm.
Yeah, after the show, I can tell you something about that because there are clinics. People, it's an industry, and we're seeing a new industry being created. I'm just saying that without any judgment. But when I was knocking on doors, not this municipal election, but the one in 2015, what people were asking me was, "Where's the money go?" But no, it probably was 2017. Where's the money going? Our tax dollars for all these drug rehabs, because we don't know where it's going.
Well,
we don't know. The accountability.
We don't.
Hang on, guys.
And whether it's effective.
We have a call.
But we see an industry being built in front of our eyes.
Hi, welcome to Matt Connarton Unleashed. Who's on the line?
It's Jenny.
Hey, Jenny. What you got?
So I just wanted to ask a question for clarity, and I was the one that was trying to ask the question. Mr. Day had made a comment that he's specifically running on two very important issues to him. He wants to roll back the expansion on Medicaid, and he wants to change the way the pension plan is. And those are the bills that he would want to see if he was governor. But then I want to clarify, did you say that if you are not presented with bills that change Medicaid and the pension plan, you will veto all other bills until you are?
Yep.
Okay.
Do you realize the harm that can do?
Well, I realize that I'm stating what I'm running on, and if I win, I've got a mandate, and I think if I'm given that mandate, I think the legislature, I mean, again, the odds of a Libertarian candidate winning, but I mean, if I've spelled this out, then, I think they would be kind of obliged to follow the mandate that I've been given. I understand.
But isn't it the same thing? You're picking two special interest things.
They're not special interests.
And you're putting them above everything else, just like the complaint you have about other politicians having special interests. You've chosen these two particular issues, though our state has plenty. I mean, you can pick a ton of different issues. You've chosen those two particular issues. And if you're saying that you're going to veto every other bill unless you get to deal with those, then you're going to hurt people.
I will tell you why. I won't hurt people because we'll actually get these issues addressed. These issues are existential threats to the solvency and sovereignty of the state. This isn't a special interest or a pet project bill. If we don't address these two issues, we're going to be broke.
But you're going to be presented with bills that have to do with incarceration, with bills that have to do with the privacy of a rape victim. I mean, you're talking about vetoing bills that literally can affect other people's lives in very, very negative ways.
Right.
I mean, you're gonna veto those bills if you don't get your two special interests. I think that's a pretty broad statement to be making. I think you should be judging bills each on its own merit. I mean, if something's political and you want to veto it because it's political because of these issues, because we all know politicians play games like that, fine. But messing around with people's lives just because you didn't get your two issues?
But my two issues...
I got to tell you, buddy, that one really crawls up my spine the wrong way.
My two issues affect everybody. And I'm telling you right now, because of the lack of attention to this, because of the cronyism on both parties, we have less than 10 years left. So literally, I don't know any other way, because right now the Republican majorities have made these problems worse. I certainly have no expectation that the Democrats, no one's even talking about addressing these issues. We have 10 years left. It's like we've been talking about with this 6,000-year analysis of currency prices and debasement of currencies.
Let me let you guys go and get into that, but thank you for answering that. That was what was my confusion. I just wanted to clarify that.
All right, Jenny. Thank you for the call.
Thanks.
Okay. And when you say we have 10 years left, what do you mean exactly? 10 years until we're broke, essentially?
I mean, essentially 10 years until we're broke. I mean, what's happened when you look at in 1991 when Metascam was passed, from then until now, we have increased spending at 30 times the rate of population growth.
Wow.
The budget has gone from, roughly $600 million to $6 billion in that time frame.
We're talking about New Hampshire?
We're talking about New Hampshire.
Wow.
And again, people aren't aware of this. It's like,
that's staggering.
Do you know what the Massachusetts budget was in 1972 or 73? Because I remember watching it, Francis Sargent, $2 billion. Now there are cities, and not big cities,
right,
have like $2 billion budgets.
Oh, yeah.
Because I wouldn't do. What would that pay for in New York a day?
Right.
But yeah, when you're saying that, it is incredible how much everything's mushroomed.
Oh yeah.
Except my 4.5% my savings account's long gone.
Well, yeah. Your savings account didn't increase like that. Your 401k didn't. Your salaries didn't.
This is before 401k.
I mean, that's actually what we're talking about here. This is so
conservatism.
Out of whack.
Yeah. Because I used to write about in the 90s about investing and about the government and about pensions. That was when the shift from the defined benefit was going to the defined contribution. And it's just amazing what the assumptions of a sane policy was then and what it is now, which is you're in a casino,
You're in a casino, and again,
high-stakes casino.
And you have the governor saying we're needing to worry about money. And yes, is this a strong position? It absolutely is. But, we actually need a turnaround CEO. The governor doesn't really have that kind of authority, except I'm going to leverage the little authority that I have,
which is the veto
power,
to
do that.
Yeah.
And is it going to be controversial? Absolutely, it's going to be controversial. I expect... I wouldn't expect anything less than it being very controversial, but I hope it at least at a minimum stimulates a conversation and gets people to start focusing on these issues. Kind of like your reaction. Wow, we've outspent 30 times.
Right.
That's unbelievable. I didn't know that. Most people don't know that.
No.
They're limited to kind of a 5-year window, and things seem like they're kind of the same. And it turns out it all added up, and now we've hit a cliff. And we have the second oldest population.
Yeah.
In the country.
I didn't know that either.
So this is the thing. The demographics here. So if you're going to run your thing as a Ponzi scheme, it's not real good when you're the second oldest state. So this is
because the assumption was for when you got older, just a 4% return, a conservative thing, because you can't lose the money. But it's like I'm talking to Matt. I'm older than both of you. It's just I can't believe the personal debt that this society now lets people take on. And Japan was in a depression for over 10 years.
Oh yeah,
because it had a similar situation.
Yeah.
But everybody tells us it's all blue skies tomorrow. You
just print more money.
It's not even print more money.
Well, that's what the federal government does.
We don't even need money now, right?
We don't need money, but
bring everybody into the country. Everything, It's like one massive credit card, and it's gone mad now.
Well, I mean, but you have people here that are, that talk about secession. You see what's going on in California and everything else.
I wanted to ask you about that. Yeah, the NH exit movement.
Oh, I'm ready to go Cal exit myself.
Yeah. Is that something that you're interested in or support in any way? Or
it's certainly something I want. I mean, I'm not running on that, but to be honest, I think protecting our sovereignty and solvency is key. And one of the things I want to avoid is this situation where. So what's going to happen now? 30% of our budget is tied to Medicaid. Now, when California goes bust, when Illinois goes bust, and they go to hand the collection plate around, we're not exactly in a position where we can say, well, no, we don't really want to participate because now we have 30% of our budget tied to this. I mean, this is 30% from almost zero in 1991. So for anybody that is listening that's interested in the independence movement, which I'm interested in being able to do that if we need to do that, this is a serious problem, and we have to address it. We can't sit here and say, well, we're positioning ourselves for this, but while becoming, more and more and more dependent upon the federal government.
And just to clarify for people, when we talk about the independence movement or NH exit, that's literally like leaving the country and becoming our own country, essentially. But it sounds like you're saying, just to clarify, you're not advocating for that, but you're not necessarily opposed to it if we have to.
Yeah, I'm not advocating. I'm not running on that.
Okay.
But I am running on positioning us to be solvent and to maintain our sovereignty. And if the rest of the country gets out of whack, that we preserve the ability to be able to do that and to not just fall apart because other places in the country have run out of control.
I want to kind of circle back to it a little bit, just because it's I almost get depressed talking about it, but it is such a big issue because you touched on it, the opioid crisis. I mean, do you have additional thoughts about what to do about the heroin epidemic and so forth? Or I guess now we're in this thing where it's transitioning to, I guess, fentanyl is the new thing, or is it something like fentanyl, but it's not whatever the new thing is now.
It was Geritol back in 1972. Well, actually, Senator Mike Gravel, I found an old Playboy magazine, which was more, was biggest magazine, not Reader's Digest.
Gravel from Alaska.
Yeah. And he has an article about the heroin crisis, the big dope crisis of the Nixon as Vietnam's winding down. And they're saying, well, watching those ads for Geritol, I guess on Lawrence Welk, which I was forced to when my grandmother came over, and aspirin, that's going to encourage people to take heroin.
Yeah.
And maybe it's a little more sophisticated argument now, but I've seen plenty of drug plagues,
Yeah.
And it always seems to be a justification. Let's throw more money at it. Throw more police, military, whatever.
Right. Put more people in prison.
But
I mean, I'd like to see a couple of things. I mean, first of all, the war on drugs has been an absolute failure.
Disaster.
$1.5 trillion, and you look at there's a graph, and the addiction rates have not improved, and so we have to cut it out with the incarceration.
Absolutely.
And what we have right now is the worst of all possible worlds. It's expand Granite Hammer, spend Medicaid money on treatment where no one knows where the money's going and there aren't any results, and then prevent essentially any other options from coming to the table.
Right.
I would like to see, and this isn't something I could do as governor, I'd like to see, I'd like to see the cryptocurrency community that's really strong here in New Hampshire maybe come together and start doing some funding of these types of initiatives voluntarily through private means. There was a group called Pineapple, Pineapple Foundation or something. So some person that has a bunch of Bitcoin gave out $55 million in charitable donations last year, just out of the blue. Nobody knows who the person is, but had an application process, found something he really liked, and said he was going to only give $1 million per project, and I think decided to give a particular project a couple of $1 million.
Wow!
So I think that there's an opportunity to show the power of what we can do voluntarily.
Yeah.
I just talked to somebody yesterday who's been involved with the drug treatment situation and who's been involved with soup kitchens and even looking at the homeless situation. And she said to me, she read this thing that I wrote on Medicaid expansion and everything else. She said, you're absolutely right. This Medicaid expansion money isn't helping. And, they're called now frequent flyers, people that are coming in and out of treatment, Narcan parties. I mean, sadly, where people are actually,
they take an overdose right at the Manchester Public Library in the Rotunda in the bathroom that's right there, then open the door. I actually saw it.
Yeah, you witnessed that happen,
I'd seen somebody die in the Army. This person was like raised from the dead. And then I was told, because I wrote, I was a freelance journalist for Yahoo, it was his second overdose that week. And then they're saying that they do it, in a public place like that. And it's quite shocking,
Well, it's shocking, but I mean, kind of related to this is, I guess we kicked out this homeless camp or whatever, and in Manchester, and the government was sent an $85,000 bill for hazmat to clean up.
Oh,
so I was talking to somebody who had the idea of saying, well, look, there are people that that are actually on welfare and other programs, and at the end of the month they need money. So why not pay them $2 a bag of trash to pick things up and to kind of clean things up? It's not $85,000. It's a voluntary solution.
Right.
In fact, I think there's somebody doing this, just funding this as kind of a trial to say, hey, look,
really?
We don't need this government thing. And you know what happens when this person starts doing this? The cops show up. You can't do that.
Yeah.
Oh, you want to give food to a homeless person, but you're not a dedicated soup kitchen? You're going to go to jail. My big thing is the government has manufactured problems, subsidized things that don't work, and then again ban people. I'm more interested in how do we get people engaged in solving these problems without the government, because the government isn't solving the problems. And I don't know what the answer to the opioid crisis is. No one does. But what that says to me is we need experimentation, and we need people that are passionate about it being funded from sources that are not something as utterly corrupt and bankrupt as Medicaid.
And by the way, when you refer to Granite Hammer, so is that the grant from the federal government to incarcerate more people, essentially?
Granite Hammer was originally Chief Willard and the Manchester PD did something because when fentanyl came in, and Manchester had to finance it originally because there was no money.
I thought it was for the state, though. It was for the city specifically.
I guess was it?
I thought it was
I guess then they were the spearhead.
Okay, well, which makes sense. It's the largest city in the state. Yeah,
right. But I'll say another thing. I remember talking to people because I've lived everywhere, and I remember New York, not just New York City where I lived in the early '80s, but New York around Albany. And you're looking at all the conditions, and you're actually looking and asking questions. Says, this I've seen this happen before. What you're going to see is a whole industry just be built over supplying this because there's so much money to be made. And then, like in New York State, I saw it. When you have somebody has to supply mattresses, so they buy a $10 mattress from the Dominican Republic and they charge $100. Mm-hmm. And the person I was telling that went off. Oh, you can't blah 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 blah. Now when I see them, it's like, see, because I've seen it before. You've seen it before. We had a mayor here, touted who never said a word until it became a campaign issue in a gubernatorial campaign 2 years ago. Oh, there's somebody coming in from her son from California. Well, geez, that's not an advertisement for anything. You know what I mean?
Right.
Suddenly, for better or worse, suddenly we've got. Look what's this crisis is suddenly here. Mm-hmm. We created these places because they said we have to, and then look what came. And I'm not going to say whether this is a moral issue or not. I'm just saying simply 2 + 2 = 4, not 2 + 2 = 5. When the government economy says it does.
Right.
Well, so part of the issue with this is The Intercept had an article about the Democrat superdelegates, and they had a thing on Bill Shaheen, and it actually said Bill Shaheen and Gordon are lobbyists for pain care and for the opioid industry.
Okay.
And that 4 out of 5 opioid addictions in New Hampshire start from these prescription drugs.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, I was kind of shocked to see that particular layout. But again, you have the politicians making money on all aspects of this. Well, yeah, let's expand Medicaid. Let's do Metascam. It's going to give us more money for the budget. And then let's be lobbyists for the prescription drug industry. Mm-hmm. And then let's be lobbyists for the treatment centers.
All your bases covered. Yeah. Once again, we're in a casino because I can show you an actual peer-reviewed paper from 2015 where they're saying, no, people with long-term chronic pain that take opiates don't become addicted to it. Because there was always this movement for like 20 years, the prohibition. We don't want to treat pain. And I'm sure there might be abuses because, we had somebody on the show that was talking about these pill mills and stuff. Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, so to that
what do you believe?
Well, so to that point, so again, so what are we doing? So we have lobbyists that are pushing the prescription drugs. We have the treatment centers that don't work. But then the other consequence of this is, my mom passed away from cancer 6 years ago, and she was living in Florida at the time. And you mentioned pill mills.
Yeah, because you said they were down south. There were lots of them.
They were cracking down on the pill mills. Well, she was dying of cancer and needed the pain medication. Right. And she called me and was crying that she thought she was going to die in agony because of this.
There's a lot of stories like that. People can't get the medication they need anymore. They get cut off. Sometimes it's because doctors misunderstand the laws. I've seen that up close here in New Hampshire. Where they think that, I can't prescribe anymore, so now I have to cut this person off or wean them off. And then, you find out later, well, no, that's not actually what the legislature did, but what they did was so unclear and murky that there's all kinds of terrible consequences.
This was true even before this big new opiate crisis. Because I know people. My father had cancer, and there were people being under-medicated for pain, particularly at the end of their lives, where it's like, my God, they're dying. But then you figure, well, if we get another month out of them, we have, our outcome, which is measured in months, is so much better.
Right.
But people, because that's why I was looking into type of research like that.
Yeah.
People, and that happened up at the VA. Suddenly Kelly Ayotte and Chris Sununu are hitting the other Republican candidate for governor, Gatzis, and they're all in this and then they're attacking Hassan, and suddenly they cut off all the opiates up at the VA with all these old vets with chronic pain, the kids with the TBI, the traumatic brain injuries and everything, like overnight. It's like, and it's politics.
A lot of the heroin addicts are vets.
Then you go down to the Massachusetts, which they'll prescribe there before it became nationwide. But I'm just skeptical about this because I've seen over 45 years, and it's like.
I've seen it too. My uncle was in the military and had an injury and got addicted to prescription drugs, and
you can get it. Yeah.
And he ran into a situation where they wouldn't give him anymore, and so he actually shot himself strategically in the kneecap.
Jesus.
Wow.
So that he could get pain meds. So I've seen this kind of close up, and it's a big issue. But I can tell you that the combination of what we're doing right now is the worst.
It's nonsensical.
Yeah.
And it feeds on itself. It's like this cycle where everybody's going to make money off of it.
Well, that's true. I mean, the whole drug war in the larger context, of course, you always follow the money. You've got the private prison industry that benefits from keeping those beds full with nonviolent drug offenders, and of course the pharmaceutical lobby who doesn't want cannabis to be legal because that cuts into their profits. And,
until they can figure it a
right.
way.
And you've got law enforcement with civil asset forfeiture where the government gets to just steal your stuff. So there's always a profit motive to this stuff. Yeah.
And it's not so much the individuals aren't bad or anything that are involved in this.
Right.
But it's just you create this entire industry. That's what I call it. I saw it in the 70s, saw it in New York in the 80s.
It is an industry. The treatment center thing, I mean, they're going to want to keep that going.
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of like with cancer medication and everything else. There's a whole leveraging the FDA to kind of slow down or discourage certain cancer treatment.
I had no idea they had pain centers that were just doling this stuff out.
Jenny in the Facebook live chat says need to get politicians out of the exam room. I agree.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you support? I assume you do, but I'll ask you: do you support going full legal with cannabis in New Hampshire?
I do, but I'm going to add one caveat to this. I don't think we should heavily tax and regulate it. It's a plant.
Right.
I think it should be treated like a plant. So I think it should be legalized. And what I worry about...
Sean Jasper will control it then. He's the Secretary of Agriculture.
But this is what I worry about. You look at, again, the size of government from $600 million to $6 billion. What I worry about happening, because this is what's been happening, is have you ever noticed if there's something that's considered a vice? You want to play poker in your house...
Yeah.
You want to, whatever. You want to consume alcohol. You want to potentially have access to marijuana.
Yeah.
Oh, it's awful. But when the state has a budget shortfall, it's a monopoly.
Yep.
And then they use the proceeds from it for the most asinine things. It's like, oh, we're going to use Keno for education. I mean, you just wouldn't come up with that kind of a pairing of something. But
but they'll say it's for education, then they'll be for something else, even if they sell it for education.
Well, that's true. Yeah, put it in the general fund and do with it what you will. Yeah,
yeah.
California had so many taxes levied. Oh, it's a 0.25% sales tax for this, and then it actually winds up for something else.
No, but it's interesting what you say because I've been surprised at how many libertarians I've talked to who actually. They a little bit differently from what you say. They have told me that they actually prefer decrim, sticking with decrim, to going full legal for exactly that reason. Because usually in states where you go full legal, you end up taxing and regulating, whereas they prefer not to do that. So and decrim tends to be kind of a de facto legalization anyway, because once you can't put people in prison for it, the police lose interest in
that was like
really
California.
enforcing it. Yeah,
but then again, it was when they had like. Medicinal marijuana, which was technically like decrim, but it was only like in Northern California. Yeah, you were free, but the LAPD would bust people even continuing on. You know?
Well,
you'd have different regimes,
and we'd have to be careful about this federal issue. Now, I thought I saw something yesterday where Trump was actually talking about
The
you know,
tax?
no, well, no.
The marijuana has been taxed.
About making deferring the marijuana issue to the states. Which
he seems to be open to it. Yeah,
that's important because
Yeah.
the one thing that we don't want to do is put ourselves in a position where people in New Hampshire are getting thrown in jail, are no
Right.
longer eligible for firearms, are going to lose access to being able to have certain kinds of jobs. And so
yeah.
I don't know why our current Democrat congressional delegation isn't there fighting to get the
Right.
federal government out of it, but that would be that should go on. And I was encouraged and surprised to see that Trump is leaning in the right way on that.
Is the idea of taxing it completely off the table for you? I just wonder because you look at a state like Colorado, who, from all indications, they seem to be swimming in money, and they have no. I mean, forget about a budget shortfall. They're now giving rebates, from what I understand, to the taxpayers. So it seems to work out awfully well for them taxing it.
I haven't looked at the full economic analysis, but anytime you increase the size of government, it's bad. I mean, I think we need to decrease the spending and the collections.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that because every time the government expands, it's killing off so many other possibilities that could go on voluntarily. So,
Yeah.
if it were going to be taxed, it shouldn't be taxed any differently than any other plant. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
we should have a fair, consistent, low as possible tax rate, kind of across the board. This is the other thing with this. Republicans who say, "Well, we don't have an income tax, we don't have a sales tax." They're holding on to this like it means something. Did you know we have a 5.4% tax on all hospital revenue?
I didn't know that. No.
This is part of the whole scam Medicaid enhancement tax situation.
Huh.
So when you think about, when you go to Walmart, you don't have to pay a sales tax. But look at your budget. How much of your money are you spending on healthcare services?
They get you one way or another, yeah.
So there's a meals tax, there's a room tax. I mean,
and property taxes, of course, very, very high.
And those are outrageous. And so again, we've gotten ourselves. What bothers me, and I get into a lot of arguments within the liberty community. I'm like, guys, stop putting up these calling these big wins, and while ignoring the fact that we only have less than 10 years left, and that the actual size of government is growing leaps and bounds. We got to fix if you were running a company, I look at this the same way. If I were running a company and looking at this, it's the equivalent of saying you wake up and you find out the cost of selling your product is twice what you're selling it for, and everybody gets together and figures out how to get the best price on pencils.
Yeah.
So
we have a call. Someone watching on Facebook Live.
I'm going to take advantage of it again. I don't care.
Hello.
I have a really great question I want to ask Mr. Day.
Yes.
It's well known New Hampshire has a very serious mental health crisis going on. And not only do we have a crisis, it's gotten worse with the reduction in care providers and beds. We've seen children who have had to spend a week in a hospital because there was no place to put them. And neither the Republicans nor the Democrats in Concord are doing anything to make the situation better. If anything, over the years, they have made it worse. For example, when they closed the children's-only facility and moved them into the same facility as adults who are pedophiles and have mental health issues. So I'd like to know, what are your plans if you were elected governor to get us out of this crisis and get mental health taken care of the way it should be?
I would really like to see, and I'm starting to talk to people about this, if there's a way to pursue private.
Thank you.
To pursue private solutions for this, because what she said, I talked to somebody recently who has had mental health issues and in fact has been waiting for a year to actually see a therapist.
Wow.
And this person was concerned about this and is actually involved with other people that have mental health issues, kind of as a day job, is like kind of in this community and kind of seeing what's going on. And so she went to the powers that be to figure out what's with this backlog.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the person actually said to me, she said, what do I have to do? Adopt a meth habit in order to get to the top of the list so that I can see a therapist? And
there you go.
And of course, and she was told no, that won't actually help you. But she was told if we got 5 therapists, we could clear the backlog, the whole backlog. Now I'm starting to just look into this, but this wouldn't surprise me if this is another one of these screw-ups where because of the certificate of need and hospital rooms and hospital beds and how many people you can have, if we aren't actually prohibiting the hiring of this, and that it's not even necessarily it's a financial thing, but a regulatory structure thing. But I think that, I mean, how much would 5 therapists be? And is this something that we could, and if you could do this, I go back to this $55 million pineapple fund. Why don't we get some of these Liberty people together and see if we can't come up with some solutions to this exact kind of problem? And I bet we might, we're going to find that the government is going to not want us to even try. But it's still worth trying, because I think that the mental health issue is a huge issue, and I don't see the government addressing it. I see it getting worse, more bureaucratic.
Yeah. Let me chime in on this. New Hampshire is one of the states with the fewest psychiatrists, and probably mental health professionals too. But that's not unique to New Hampshire, because psychiatrists, it's so low paying. Very few MDs, relatively speaking, go into it. But New Hampshire lacks psychiatrists and probably psychologists with PhDs. And I know, as a person dealing with complex PTSD problems in the Army and that there is a difference between a PhD who actually knows what they're doing, like with PTSD, and an MA. But there is a lack of trained personnel. That said, there might be other ways of doing it. The group therapy, Jeff Cassell, who was a PhD and was up at the VA, asked me about that. But of course, when he was there, I don't know if they use group therapy as much.
Yeah.
Of course, Bob Newhart show, they did the group therapy.
Yes, they did.
They did.
But there could be other approaches. Because this is something we all have to deal with. But the personnel,
and we need to experiment, because we obviously haven't cracked that code either. I mean, the other stat. I mean, not to I hammer Sununu
telemedicine,
but telemedicine and video conferencing. But we've got the live free or die motto, and and I look at Sununu and I'm like, well, highest fentanyl death rate, suicides up 48.3%.
I didn't know that. Wow,
that stat came out a week or so ago. I had no idea. So this is an absolute crisis. And so, but we need, again, this is why. Let's open up some voluntary solutions, because we need to experiment, and the government is constrained and unable to experiment by the structure of the organizations and how they deploy money. It can't work.
Yeah. We'll start to wrap up shortly. It's been almost an hour, but I do want to ask you kind of a broad question, but infrastructure. I'm always hearing about the red listed bridges that we have in this state, and the roads, and a lot of places are terrible. Any thoughts on that? Fixing the infrastructure, because obviously I know you don't want to spend money, but it's going to take a lot of money if we're going to actually fix all this.
Well, it's going to take money, but it depends on the source of the funds, and actually, how much control does the governor even have over this issue. But I will say to that point, did you see this thing that Domino's is doing?
I did. You know what? I didn't have a chance to read the article yet, but I saw it on Reason.com, something about roads. They're going to...
So Domino's is going to do some kind of contest. You maybe submit something, or I don't know, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And they're going to actually go in and fill potholes.
Yeah.
In select cities that win this. And so, I mean, this is a constant libertarian, debate. It's like, well, who without, big government, who will build the roads?
Right.
But again, this is another one of those things that no one would think about. If you think about things as the way that they've been done, no one would ever conceive of something like maybe Domino's would come in and, as part of, the business model and a PR thing, start fixing potholes. I mean, who knows what kind of other...
Adopt the road, the potholes,
Yeah. I mean, exactly. So I think we should be open to that. And, you mentioned Reason. Bob Poole is somebody who was one of the founders of Reason, and and he actually heads up the transportation policy aspect over there, and has written extensively about privatizing roads. And so, frankly, I think it would be interesting to explore completely new models on that, because I think we all know. I sat in on a Bedford town thing once, and it was like $1 million per mile of sidewalk or something. I was just going through and looking at this. I'm like, all right, well, maybe we
got to bond it like the city of Manchester, bond it all.
Yeah, well, and they did. So we
and they are.
I think we need to be judicious about the way we analyze these things, because we know that money tends to get. I see the same potholes getting filled
Mhm.
over and over
and
again.
over.
It seems like there's a better way.
Yeah. Agreed. Well, we'll start to wrap up. John, did you have any other questions for Aaron? Or
Oh, I just want to say one thing.
Yeah.
I was astounded, and Elizabeth Roth brought it up. We were testifying about the I-93 expansion. Having come from California, where an earthquake will drop an entire bridge, and they'll build it back, and a new highway in like 18 months, that it takes 30 or 40 years just to expand I-93.
I feel like my entire
mean,
adult life they've been
jeez.
working on that. Yeah.
I've been back 8 years, 8.5, and we're going to go 30 more years to do it. It's like, there's got to be a better way.
You got to
Well,
crack that whip.
got to
Yeah.
be a better way.
I lived in Florida for a while, and you know, I-95 was just absolutely horrible. And I remember seeing this meme, and it's from Back to the Future.
Yeah.
And he comes back and he says, Marty, you know, I've come from 2050. They're still working on I-95.
Oh, forever, you know?
And so, you know,
Yeah.
again, we need some innovation, even with roads.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Well, Aaron, this has been great. It's great to see you, and please tell the listeners where they should go online if you have a website for your campaign and social media that we need to know about and all that stuff.
Sure, I have a rough website, which I'll be updating it next week, but day4nh.co.
Okay.
And then you can reach me by email, ardventures@gmail.com. And then I'm also on Facebook, so you can just type in, you know, Aaron Day 4NH.
Okay.
FORNH, and my candidate page will pop up. And that's actually where I'm the most active in terms of frequency of communication.
Yeah, okay. And do you have any events or anything coming up, any campaign events or anything like that?
I do. I'm scheduling, I want to do one big event in each of the 5 executive council districts. And so,
okay.
I have one coming up. My first one is on August the 4th in Northwood from, I believe it's noon to 2 o'clock.
Okay.
So that's going to be the first big one, and then we're going to continue from there.
Yeah. All right.
And so I'll be updating and putting a schedule of other places where I'll be speaking and other events that I'll be attending.
Okay. Fantastic. John, thank you for your help tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you to Jenny for calling in. And for those who watched live on Facebook on Thursday night, thank you. And everybody else listening on Friday. I hope you enjoyed this. And this will be available, of course, at WMNHradio.org after it airs during the live show. And hopefully, Aaron, we can get you in on a live one sometime.
Absolutely.
Whenever.
Would love to.
Yeah.
Maybe
absolutely.
we can do a twofer. You could be on, if you can make a Tuesday, then you can come on my show.
Oh, that's right.
Which is 7 to 8 on Tuesdays.
Yeah,
Okay.
on Channel 23, yeah.
Yeah, that sounds great.
All right, great. All right, Aaron Day, candidate for governor. Thank you so much.
Thank you.